Sorry about that. My phone memory got full. I had to delete a few things in order to finish the lesson here. So, if I recall where I was at when things cut off here, I think we were saying that a lot of people are saying, is impeachment even really a feasible system of being a check on presidential power anymore, since it really seems as though it's almost impossible to get impeached with your party in charge. Nixon had lost the support of the Republicans in the 70s. But Johnson was in the weird place of kind of being a man without a party in the 1860s. But twice in recent years there's been impeachments with Clinton and with Trump, and in neither case was there any sort of widespread movement of his party away from him. Clinton was impeached without a single Democratic vote. Trump was impeached with only one Republican vote. And so it seems like the two-party system may have kind of left impeachment a less effective check on the presidency than had been intended. Either way, Clinton winds up weathering the storm long enough to finish his term, but is not able to accomplish much in the last couple years. Before he leaves office, there's one more big scandal that emerges, and it literally emerges on the last day of his presidency. So, if you recall, one of the powers of the presidency is the power of pardon. The presidents have the right to pardon anyone for any violation of a federal crime. They can commute sentences, they can give clemency, they can expunge it from the record completely if they want. And a lot of times, a lot of pardons are done kind of late in the presidency because no one wants to pardon a murderer, and then then they do something else, and the president pardoned them, right? So pardons typically happen in a flurry at the end. That's not unusual, but Clinton took it to another level. So he pardoned a terrorist who was connected to a Puerto Rican independence movement that wanted independence for Puerto Rico from the United States, and had used weapons against the government in the process. And there was some evidence that this happened after the intervention of of an advocacy group that wound up donating a lot to Hillary Clinton's Senate campaign, because Hillary Clinton, the First Lady, is going to run for Senate in 2000, as soon as Bill's presidency is over. But the most controversial of the pardons, there were several of them. The most controversial was the pardon of a man by the name of Mark Rich, who had traded with, I can't remember if it was Iran or Iraq, but they had traded with a nation that we had under embargo because of their ties to terrorism. Had then evaded. In addition to breaking the embargo, he had invaded taxes to the tune of millions of dollars, like tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. He was we're talking about some bank that this guy was making and then not giving Uncle Sam a cut of. And he had actually, fled the United States to become a dual citizen in a European country like Switzerland or Monaco or something like that, to escape persecution in the U.S. And Clinton, and it just so happens that coincidentally, either Mark Rich or one of his family members, I can't remember the precise details, either Rich or a family member had donated significant amounts of money to Clinton's 96 reelection campaign. And then Mark Rich, after defrauding the taxpayer of hundreds of millions of dollars, or at least tens of millions of dollars, winds up getting pardoned on Clinton's last day in office. So, literally on the last day, Clinton is still doing shady stuff. So he's just a shady character. I always forget just how much I dislike him until I hear him talking. And then I remember, oh yeah, that's right. Hearing him talk is makes you feel gross inside. So Clinton ends with his presidency with fairly low, I should say that. He winds up being a very polarizing president by the end of it all, which is odd for a guy who was really regarded as a moderate. Again, some major kind of conservative legislation passes while he's president. He leads the group called the New Democrats. That was this reaction against Dukakis and other failed liberal candidates. He takes a lot of heat from his left on some issues. he makes a speech where he says, quote, "The era of big government is over." He continues deregulation in certain areas connected to financial law in a way that kind of continued what Reagan and Bush were doing, although a little bit less aggressively. So there's a lot of ways you would think that Clinton would have been a fairly unifying president, but because of his behavior and all this kind of stuff, he winds up being a very polarizing president who is very, very deeply hated. His wife winds up even more deeply hated than he is, largely because of her personality, because just to be honest, she seems like the Wicked Witch of the West. But nonetheless, but his reputation has kind of grown over the years, just as people kind of look back on the 90s and and giving him more personal credit than they did at the time for the way the economy prospered in the 90s, and for just him kind of being one of the last presidents of the era where people could get things done together. George W. Bush had that instinct of trying to work across party lines, but he would find that the Democrats of Bush's era are going to take what Gingrich's Republicans did as far as trying to push back against Clinton, take it to the next level, and then the Republicans during the Obama era are going to take it to another level after that, and then the Democrats in the Trump era are maybe taking it to another level after that, and it doesn't seem to be any end in sight to that phenomenon, which makes me wonder, quite how much longer we can have a functioning democracy if we can't kind of learn to cooperate a little bit more. But nonetheless, Clinton leaves a pretty complex legacy, and people on the left are starting to turn on Bill Clinton now, particularly kind of starting to look at him as kind of a traitor to the movement, or like he could have done more for the liberal cause while he was president if he hadn't been so concerned about popularity and so on. Clinton was so consumed with popularity and with making decisions that polled well, which actually wound up working well for the country in a few cases, because he did things like the Welfare Reform Act that were against his instincts but were popular. So there was some good that came out of that, although you also don't really respect it in the man. But Clinton was such a politician, he literally took polls about where he would go on vacation, because he didn't want to go on vacation to a place that would look too snobby to voters or whatever. So, literally Clinton took every step he made with the voters in mind. So a lot of people look, on the left look back at him as kind of a traitor and a sellout, and a lot of people on the right still don't like him anyway because of all the scandal and stuff that's swirled around his presidency. So anyway, that pretty much leads us to the end of the 1990s. The last couple days we will look at the 9/11 and its aftermath. Certainly get to the Bush presidency, maybe a little bit of the Obama-Trump years if time permits, but we shall see. All right, so y'all have yourselves a good day. I'll see you soon.